Sir, please move to economy. This seat is not for someone like you. In the first-class cabin, a few heads lifted. The thin gold light glinted off champagne glasses and the navy suit of Ethan Carter, the man who had just been asked to vacate seat 1A. The cabin's hum returned, soft and layered. The click of seatbelt buckles, the slow roll of suitcase wheels on carpet, the half-curious, half-cautious murmurs. Lena Park, 35, her name tag gleaming on the left side of her chest, stood with her arms crossed, the power stance of a senior flight attendant who had long since mastered reading passengers at a glance. "Ticket, please." Ethan handed it over. For the third time. Booking code, Global Air 447, JFK, LAX. First class 1A. His voice was calm, just audible. There must be a mistake. Lena tilted the ticket toward the light, as if scanning for counterfeit money. A sliver of a thin smile touched her lips. Passengers in this cabin usually dress differently. Her gaze flicked down to his polished Italian shoes, up to the platinum watch catching a shard of light. She added, as if delivering a conclusion, "Are you sure? This ticket is yours." In seat 2A, a teenager raised her phone, the red REC light glowing. Chloe Nguyen, 17, muttered into her live stream, "This is insane. They're trying to kick a businessman out of 1A for no reason." Viewers spiked, 847, 1,231, 1,847. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. An elderly woman in 1F tightened her grip on her purse, eyes sharpened from a lifetime of watching discrimination disguised as policy. In 1C, a salt and pepper-haired man adjusted his tie and said loudly enough for Rose to hear, "Finally, someone's enforcing the rules." 3:52 p.m. 15 minutes to departure. The junior attendant, Maria Santos, whispered to Lena, "Maybe, let's just—" "No," Lena cut in. "Rules are rules." Victor Ramos, 34, the purser, appeared like a verdict already decided. He approached without asking, only announcing, "What's going on?" "Lena, this passenger is claiming first class. I'm not convinced." Victor nodded slightly, his look ready to stand with procedure. Performance reviews praised his unwavering support of policy, an invisible shield. Ethan stayed silent. A memory flickered. An 8-year-old boy outside a country club gate, his father's associate crouching down to say, "There are rules, you know. Not everyone belongs." The smell of pool chlorine, the glint of sunlight, the feeling of being pushed out, rushing back now like a cold wind. "Sir, phone to airplane mode," Victor prompted as Ethan reached for his device. "Just a moment," Ethan replied, voice flat as a lake before a storm. The intercom hissed softly. The captain announced preparations for departure. The door sealed shut with a hiss. 160. 7 passengers settled in. Some checked emails, others texted. A few quietly picked sides. In 3B, a young woman urged, "Hurry up, I have a connection." Ethan lifted his gaze, his eyes steady. "I need to make a call," he said. "You're delaying the flight," Victor pressed. "Or preventing another kind of accident," Ethan murmured. Officer Daniel Morales, 42, airport security, stepped in, with a weary shake of his head. One hand rested on his radio, his voice like a script read too many times. "You have 60 seconds to comply, or we'll escort you off." Live stream count passed 8,500. Comments poured like a river. Racist. Film everything. What airline is this? At seat while black starting to trend. Lena lifted her chin slightly, victory close. She didn't see the platinum card flash briefly in Ethan's wallet, didn't notice the corner of the iPad screen showing the chain of emails labeled Denver Hub, Infrastructure Renewal. All she saw was a face that didn't fit her model for 1A. "Time's up," Lena said sweetly, edged with poison. Ethan closed his laptop. The clock ticked 4:05. 25 minutes since she'd approached him, 25 minutes a template had been pressed over the real person. The captain suddenly cut in with an oddly worded announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, our departure system has encountered a technical issue. Please remain seated." Fractures rippled through the cabin. Some groaned. Some reached for phones. 1C scowled. "Get him out! I have business in LA." In 2B, a young mother objected. "That's not right. He didn't do anything wrong." "Mind your own business," 1C snapped. Have we ever watched injustice unfold and thought, "It's not my concern"? Ethan rose. Not to leave, to stand. His 6'2" frame seemed to cast a shadow over the narrow aisle. His voice was low, steady, like a gavel strike. "Apologies for the delay. This will be resolved shortly." "You don't have the right to address passengers," Lena flushed. "Sit down, or you'll have me removed." "For sitting in the seat I paid for?" Ethan asked, tone unchanged. Live stream hit 35,000. Morales stepped closer, hand brushing the cuffs. "You are under arrest for what?" Ethan turned, locking eyes. "Sitting while black?" A knife into the silence. The cabin, still. Ethan pulled out his phone. This time, no request for permission. His fingers moved fast, like a machine executing an emergency halt. "Activate Protocol 7, he said into the phone, each word even as if reading a contract clause. "Confirm." On the other end, a woman's voice. "Confirmed. All systems responding to shutdown sequence." Lena and Victor froze for a moment, then masked it with frowns that said, "If we don't understand, we'll pretend we do." The captain's voice came again, heavier this time. "All global air flights are under a nationwide ground stop." "Ground stop? What's that?" 1C bolted upright. His wife searched quickly. "It means no planes can take off." From front to back, shivers passed between hands. Chloe zoomed in on Ethan's face, her voice shaking with excitement. "This is bigger than a seat." Viewers surged past 50,000. Morales' expression shifted as his radio barked. He stepped back, tilting his head to listen, and paled. Ethan sat back down, reopened his laptop, movements oddly relaxed in the eye of the storm. On screen, a contract dashboard with blunt headings. Service agreement, mission, critical infrastructure, status lights green, SLA 99.95%, force majeure, termination 14.2, material breach, emergency governance, Protocol 7. Ethan's phone rang. He answered on the first chime. A deep, authoritative voice filled the first-class cabin. "Robert Sinclair here, CEO of Global Air." The air went rigid. For the first time, 1C was silent. "Hello, Robert," Ethan replied, the familiar tone of someone who had spoken many times before. "We need to talk." He looked at Lena. For the first time, her eyes faltered. Victor took an unconscious step back. Morales listened to his radio, swallowed. Sinclair's voice tightened. "Our systems are completely down. It says the shutdown originated from Carter Systems." Ethan's calm was surgical. "Correct. Carter Systems runs all of Global Air's booking infrastructure. An $7 million service contract." The number detonated like fireworks in a sealed cabin. Fingers began tapping. "Carter Systems CEO." Live stream swelled to 75,000. "He's the CEO. He shut down the whole airline." Lena dropped into an empty seat beside 1A, her body heavy as lead. But Ethan wasn't finished. He closed the laptop, his voice steady, striking like a judge's gavel. "And one more thing, Robert." The entire cabin leaned toward the sound. "This is only the beginning." Outside the window, the sunset cast a deep orange stripe along the tarmac, like a contract laid flat on a table, waiting for a signature. The omniscient narrator could step into their thoughts. In Lena, the puzzle pieces fell into place. Not a fake passenger, not someone angling for an upgrade with miles, but a client at the system's nerve center, someone who could stop the heartbeat of an airline with a single command. In Victor, the word policy suddenly shrank beside terms like material breach, governance, SLA. He remembered those perfunctory sensitivity trainings ticked off for compliance and glimpsed the canyon between enforcement and fairness. In Morales, a public servant used to reading scripts, came the first stirrings of knowing when the script is wrong. His radio repeated Ethan Carter's name at the pace of an alarm. In Ethan, the memory of that childhood pool blended with Clause 14.2. Any act of discrimination proven at a customer touchpoint shall constitute a material breach, enabling the service provider to execute emergency measures. He had written that clause 5 years ago as a human safeguard in a forest of mechanical ones. Today it was pulled. You're watching a chess match begun before the other side had even set its pieces. Have you ever wished that in an airport, a restaurant, a hotel, there was a clause 14.2 standing for your dignity? The PA crackled once more. The captain's voice was calm. "We will update you as soon as systems are restored." But on a deeper level, it wasn't the flight system being tested. It was the human one. The soft clink of spoon against glass, the slow inhale of a few passengers, the rapid scroll of thousands of comments outside, all blended into an overture. Ethan leaned back. He hadn't played his move yet. He'd only introduced the rules. And from this moment, those rules would force everyone in this cabin, and beyond, to choose. Cling to habit or step toward justice. In Chloe's frame, the image trembled. She whispered into her phone, "If this is just the beginning, what's next?" The shot froze on Ethan's hand, resting atop the laptop, the hand that had signed billion-dollar contracts and had once been turned away from a swimming pool for the rules. The first-class lighting seemed to shift, deeper, heavier, ready for the tempo to quicken. The door to the story had closed behind us, and ahead stretched a long corridor toward negotiation, conditions, consequences, and something rare in the skies: accountability. The roar of the jet engines outside the window faded, leaving only the chill of the air conditioning and the muted golden light spilling over the first-class row. Ethan Grant sat still, his eyes fixed on the face of Lauren Chu, the purser, who stood with her arms crossed, the tap of her heels beating a quick, impatient rhythm into the carpet. "You need to move to economy. This seat is not for people like you." The words cut sharp, loud enough for every nearby passenger to hear. Curious eyes turned toward him, a black man in a navy suit, an open laptop in front of him glowing with quarterly revenue forecasts. Ethan looked up slightly, his voice low but firm. "You must be mistaken. This is 1A, first class, fully paid." Lauren narrowed her eyes. She glanced over his suit, the Italian leather shoes, the platinum watch, and instead of acknowledging him, her lips curved with doubt. Across the aisle, a teenage boy lifted his phone, the red recording light blinking. The air thickened. "Are you sure this ticket is yours?" Lauren's voice carried like an accusation, drawing a few raised eyebrows from other passengers. A salt and pepper. Haired man in 1C nodded his approval at her, while an elderly woman in 1F frowned, her hands tightening around the strap of her purse. Ethan had scanned his boarding pass twice already, yet Lauren still held it up to the light as if checking for forgery. Seconds dragged. From a row back, a young woman muttered, "Probably an upgrade from points." On the teens' live stream, views were climbing fast. "You see this? They're trying to kick a passenger out of first class, for no reason at all." He spoke quietly into the camera, but Ethan heard it. He stayed silent, his hand covering his platinum tier loyalty card and the CEO business card of Grant Systems, a multi-billion-dollar tech company, tucked neatly in his wallet. Lauren gestured to a colleague. "David, come take a look." David Kumar, the lead flight attendant, stepped forward with the pre-set look of agreement. At 30-4, he'd climbed to this role by adhering strictly to procedure, and now every eye waited for his verdict. "This gentleman says he's in first class," Lauren said, her tone laced with implication. "I'm not convinced." In a flash, an 8-year-old memory hit Ethan, standing outside the gates of a country club, hearing his father's associate say, "Rules are rules. Some places aren't for everyone." The memory faded. Ethan picked up his phone, speaking evenly. "I just need to make a call." David moved closer, his voice cold. "Phones need to be in airplane mode. It'll take 1 minute." Over the intercom, the captain's voice came through. "Prepare for takeoff." Passengers began to stir restlessly, some shaking their heads. A woman in 3B spoke up. "Can we get this resolved? I've got a connection." Ethan dialed, his voice deep. "It's me, Ethan Grant. Activate Protocol 7. Lauren and David exchanged a quick glance, a term they'd never heard in training. An airport security officer stepped in, hand resting on his radio. "You have 60 seconds to comply, or you'll be removed." On the live stream, viewer numbers spiked, comments pouring in. "Blatant discrimination. keep filming. What airline is this? Ethan closed his laptop, set his loyalty card on the armrest. Platinum edge, catching the light, all. But Lauren didn't notice. 30 seconds. That's enough, Lauren said with quiet triumph. But at that moment, the intercom sounded again. We're experiencing a technical issue. Please remain seated. The aircraft door sealed shut. 167 passengers, unaware they were about to witness a confrontation unlike anything in the airline's history. The security officer repeated his warning, but Ethan sat still, his eyes calm as water. Just get him off and we can go, the man in 1C grumbled. That's not right. He hasn't done anything wrong. A young mother in 2B countered, only to be dismissed. It's none of your business. Lauren motioned to her colleague Maria, who hesitated. Maybe we should? No. Rules are rules. I've done this job 6 years. On the teen's phone, the hashtag #SeatWhileBlack began trending nationwide. A reporter in New York was already calling the newsroom. Get a breaking team ready. Ethan's phone buzzed again. 3 calls in a row from legal, media, and one special number that made his jaw tighten. David leaned in, pressure in his tone. You're delaying the whole flight. A passenger in 4A snapped, Move already, it's been 10 minutes. The elderly woman in 1F finally spoke. Young man, leave him be. He's done nothing wrong. Ethan rose. Not to leave, to face the cabin. His shadow stretched into the aisle, his voice carrying steady. Ladies and gentlemen, apologies for the delay. This will be resolved shortly. Lauren's face flushed. You don't have permission. Or what? Arrest me for sitting in the seat I paid for? Livestream viewers broke 35,000. Major accounts began sharing the clip. The security officer's hand closed on the cuffs. I'm placing you under arrest for... For what? Ethan cut in, eyes locked. For sitting while my skin is black? The cabin fell silent. Ethan lifted his phone, his voice deep and certain. Protocol 7, activate system wide. The reply came instantly. Confirmed. Systems entering shutdown sequence. Lauren and David flinched. Before they could process, the intercom carried a heavier announcement. All flights for this airline are temporarily grounded. Passengers reached for their phones as social media exploded. Airline frozen nationwide. David tried the internal line. It was jammed. Ethan sat back down, reopened his laptop as if nothing had happened. The glow of the screen mirrored in the steel of his gaze. You should call your higher-ups, Ethan told the security officer, and tell them Ethan Grant is on Flight 447. The officer's face drained of color. Live stream views hit 50,000. The phone rang. Ethan answered. Ethan, this is Robert Hayes, CEO of the airline. We need to talk. The cabin went utterly still. Lauren stepped back. David understood. This was no ordinary passenger. Ethan looked up, his voice even and cold. Yes, Robert. We do need to talk. Robert Hayes's voice carried clearly through the cabin, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Ethan, our entire system just went down. It reports the shutdown originated from your company's servers. A ripple of murmurs spread through the rows. Chloe, the teenage girl live streaming, almost whispered into her phone. He's the CEO of the company that runs this airline's entire booking system. Viewers passed 75,000, comments flooding the screen. Ethan didn't look at his laptop. His gaze moved across Lauren Chu, then rested on David Kumar. before he finally replied. "That's correct, Robert. Grant Systems currently operates Global Air's entire reservation infrastructure. Contract value, $847 million. A sharp exhale came from 1C, where the man who had earlier sneered was now hunched over his phone, searching. "Oh my God, his net worth is over $400 million, he muttered. Ethan's lips curved slightly, but his voice remained calm, as if reading a quarterly report. "And today, your employees decided I don't belong in first class." Robert was silent for a long second. On the other end, the noise of an emergency operations room bled through. Voices shouting about plunging stock prices, about flights stranded at the gates. "Ethan, what do you want?" The sound of Ethan's typing filled the air, short and decisive. His screen lit up with 3 bullet points. He read them aloud, voice steady, like dictating a contract. 1. Immediate suspension of flight attendant Lauren Chu, pending full investigation. 2. Mandatory unconscious bias training for all frontline staff, completed within 60 days with measurable results. 3. An independent bias reporting system, insulated from being buried in corporate bureaucracy. Lauren's mouth fell open, though no sound came out. David shifted back slightly, sweat gathering at his temples. Robert exhaled heavily, his voice lower. "And if we don't agree?" Ethan tapped a few more keys. On the screen, a window appeared. Termination of service agreement, a contract cancellation template. Then Global Air will have 72 hours to find a new provider for its global reservation system. Estimated cost, $2.8 billion. And I doubt anyone can deliver in time. "My God," escaped from somewhere mid-cabin. Chloe swung the camera toward herself. "Did you hear that? He could erase this airline with a single keystroke." Robert was silent so long that the shuffling of papers could be heard over the line. Finally, he said, "You'll have written agreement within the hour. But Ethan, this will shake the entire industry." Ethan tilted his head slightly, his eyes fixed on Lauren. "Robert, I'm not concerned about shockwaves. I'm concerned about real change." A heavy pause fell over the cabin like a thick curtain. Then Ethan continued, "One more thing, more. Lauren will be the first to complete the training, and afterward, she will train others." Lauren's eyes widened, her voice catching. "Why me?" Because," Ethan interrupted, "punishment without the chance to change is just revenge, and opportunity without consequences is just enabling." The cabin went utterly still. The man in 1C swallowed hard. The elderly woman in 1F smiled faintly, her eyes glinting with understanding. Robert sounded surprised. "You want to help her?" "I want to turn a mistake into a tool for changing an organization's culture." Livestream viewers passed 120,000. Comments flooded in. "This is justice. Forgive but don't forget." Robert's voice quickened. "Ethan, I commit. All 3 demands will be met. Lauren suspended immediately. We'll sign the document within an hour, and she will attend the training." Ethan nodded slightly, though Robert couldn't see it. "Good. But remember, this isn't my victory. It's your test." A few claps broke out, starting at 1F, spreading to 2B, then sporadically through the cabin. Not everyone joined, but enough for Lauren to lower her gaze. Ethan turned to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this has been an unusual flight, but remember this: change doesn't come from outrage. It comes from strategic action, from consequences that force people to change." On Chloe's screen, a comment popped up. "This is a life lesson." Robert spoke again. "Ethan, we'll have the system back online in 5 minutes, but..." "But what?" "I want this conversation to stay between us." Ethan's smile was thin as he shook his head. "No, Robert. Some stories need witnesses. Some changes need the public to see." Applause rose again, louder this time. David glanced at Lauren, showing for the first time a flicker of remorse. Ethan lowered his phone and reopened his laptop. The quarterly revenue forecast still glowed on the screen. He typed a few keystrokes, calm as if the crisis had never happened. But everyone in the cabin knew nothing would ever be the same again. The roar of the engines outside the window remained silent, but the air inside the cabin was thicker than the grey clouds beyond the glass. Over the intercom, Captain Morrison's voice came through again, calmer this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, the system is being restored. We expect to depart in just a few minutes." Ethan sat upright, fingers interlaced, eyes on his laptop screen, though his mind was taking in every detail around him. Lauren Chu kept her head bowed, fingers gripping the edge of her apron as if holding onto it was the only way to stay steady. David Kumar stood by the cockpit door, his earlier arrogance replaced by a mix of unease and caution. In seat 1F, the elderly woman leaned toward the young woman in 2B and whispered, "You know, I saw moments like this 50 years ago. I just didn't think I'd live to see them again." The young woman nodded, her gaze fixed on Ethan, as if committing each of his movements to memory. On Chloe's phone, the teenage live streamer, the viewer count hit 150,000. Comments poured in like a flood. "This airline is finished. This is the definition of leverage. He didn't just save himself, he opened the way for everyone." Ethan leaned back slightly and tapped a sequence of keys. On the other end, the chief engineer at Grant Systems confirmed, "Phase 1 restart complete. Full network stability in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. He didn't need to inform the captain. Robert Hayes was already patched in. And somewhere at 35,000 feet over Chicago's airspace, the CEO was exhaling relief while calculating the losses by the minute. Lauren suddenly spoke, her voice small. "Mr. Grant, I didn't mean to." Ethan turned to her, his gaze no longer as sharp as before, but heavier. "Ms. Chu, the problem isn't intent, it's the outcome. Good intentions that cause harm are still harm. And this harm wasn't just to me." David stepped forward, taking a deep breath. "I should have stopped this sooner." "You could have," Ethan replied simply, "but you didn't. Now you have a choice. Learn from the mistake or repeat it. Your career will depend on that decision." The cockpit door cracked open and Captain Morrison emerged. He looked directly at Ethan and gave a slight nod. No words, but enough to convey the message. "I understand what just happened." Around the cabin, passengers began quietly sharing their own stories, about being held up at security for looking suspicious, about hotel staff asking, "Are you sure you booked this room?" Fragments of personal experiences, but pieced together, they painted a disturbingly familiar picture. The elderly woman in 1F spoke aloud. "You see, you don't need to shout, you don't need to smash things, and you can still change the game. This is power used in the right place." The man in 1C, the one who had urged them to drag him off, lowered his head and muttered, "Mr. Grant, I owe you an apology." Ethan simply nodded, eyes still on his laptop. "Remember this feeling, and next time, speak up." Chloe lowered her phone slightly and whispered to the woman next to her, "I think this clip is going to be a business school case study." The woman smiled, "And you'll be able to say you were here. Row 2. A soft ding came over the PA. Morrison announced, "All systems restored. We are ready to taxi." On the central screen at Grant Systems, performance charts shifted from red to green. Robert Hayes sent a message. "The agreement is being drafted by legal. You'll have the signed copy in 58 minutes." Ethan closed his laptop and set it on the folding table. The light reflected on his face, not the glow of simple victory, but the focus of a man who had just set a precedent. As the aircraft began to taxi, Lauren stepped forward, her voice tight with emotion. "Miss Grant, I will take the training course, not because I'm forced to, but because I need to." Ethan looked at her and gave a small nod. "Then do it right. And later, when you stand in front of a class, remember how you feel today." The engines roared louder. The plane accelerated down the runway. No one in the cabin spoke, only the sound of the rushing wind and the thud of their own heartbeats. When the wheels left the ground, everyone knew this journey had taken on a different meaning. Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes for a few seconds. But in his mind, he was already counting down to day 30, the deadline for Global Air to fulfill its commitments. And he knew that if they broke their word, the terminate agreement button would still be right there on his keyboard. 30 days later. The morning in Los Angeles was clear, sunlight spilling across the glass facade of Grant Systems headquarters, reflecting the skyline like a massive mirror. On the 42nd floor, in the executive boardroom, Ethan Carter sat at the head of the table, a thick report over 100 pages long in front of him, the cover bearing the Global Air logo. Rachel, his long-time assistant, set an espresso in front of him and opened her laptop. "This month's report, you should start at page 3. Ethan turned the pages. The numbers appeared like confirmation. Complaints related to bias down 67% year. Over year, 94% of frontline staff had completed unconscious bias recognition training, and the zero-tolerance policy had been implemented across all 67 of the airline's hubs. He nodded slightly, not in surprise, but because this was exactly the goal he had set back on Flight 447, a goal the entire airline industry once thought was unrealistic. Rachel continued, "And this," she placed a cream-colored envelope in front of him, "from Lauren Chu." Ethan opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the slanting script still fresh in ink. "Mr. Carter, I completed the training program last week. It was the hardest and most necessary experience of my career. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only want to thank you for giving me the chance to start over and for forcing me to face what I hadn't realized. Next month, I'll begin a new role as a bias training coordinator. I'll spend at least a year helping others see what I was blind to. You chose to turn a mistake into an opportunity for change, and I will not let that opportunity go to waste. Lauren Chu. Ethan closed the letter and placed it neatly beside the report. His gaze drifted beyond the glass, out to the city below. The desk phone rang. Rachel hit speaker. Maya's voice, his daughter, came through from her dorm. "Dad!" "Have you heard? United Airlines just signed on to use your training program." Ethan smiled. "And Delta and Southwest are considering. You're starting a domino effect, right?" "We're starting it," Ethan corrected. "Not just me. Everyone who witnessed it, shared it, talked about it. They all had a part." The morning news on the wall, mounted screen, shifted to the business segment. Hashtag Seat While Black hits 2.3 million mentions. Over 40 companies reach out to Grant Systems to inquire about anti-bias solutions. Ethan rose and walked to the window. The traffic below looked like silver threads in constant motion. He thought of hotels now reviewing their check in procedures, restaurant chains adjusting their service policies, car rental companies tightening customer service standards. One story on a single flight had sparked entire industries to re-examine themselves. Rachel's voice cut into his thoughts. American Airlines wants you for their First Class for Everyone campaign. They want it to air during Black History Month. Ethan paused a moment. Agreed. But I want Lauren in the campaign. Her story needs to be told. Message redemption alongside accountability. Exactly. His phone buzzed. A text from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Carter, this is Officer Daniel Morales from that day at JFK. I just completed the training. It opened my eyes to things I'd never considered. Thank you for handling everything with kindness. Ethan looked at the message and exhaled slowly. This was the kind of success that couldn't be measured in stock prices or contracts. When a person changed, not because they were forced to, but because they truly wanted to. He returned to the table and opened his laptop. The final page of the report displayed Industry Impact Forecast. 47 major companies implementing similar policies, 23 states strengthening anti-discrimination laws, airline industry complaints down 38% in the first quarter. Ethan rested his hands on the keyboard, but didn't type right away. He remembered that moment on the plane when the entire cabin fell silent, all eyes on him, and he'd said, "Some stories need witnesses." Now, those witnesses had become messengers. The story was no longer his alone, and that was the real victory. He typed the first line of his email reply to Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Remember, change doesn't end when the training is over. It ends when no one needs the training anymore. 6 months later, the National Convention Center, Washington, D.C. The main hall of the National Civil Rights Conference was packed. Over 3,000 activists, business leaders, lawyers, students, and ordinary citizens united by a single topic: how to turn justice into sustainable action. Stage lights poured over the central podium. The massive LED screen behind it displayed the words, Keynote Speaker, Ethan Carter, CEO, Grant Systems. Applause rippled through the hall as Ethan stepped out, tall in a deep blue suit and solid colored tie. He stood still for a few seconds, his gaze sweeping across the room as if committing each face to memory. Then he began, his voice low but carrying clearly. 6 months ago, I was just a passenger trying to get to Los Angeles. 6 months ago, I was asked to leave a seat I had paid for, not because of a security or technical reason, but because someone decided I didn't belong there. A wave of murmurs passed through the audience. Ethan continued, never raising his voice, yet each word landed like a stone. That day, I had a choice: to walk away in swoons, or to use the power I had to force a system to change. I chose the second. He briefly recounted the events on Flight 447, enough for the audience to feel the pulse of the moment, but without turning it into self-glorification. When he mentioned Protocol 7, some chuckled softly, others nodded in recognition. In the VIP row, Lauren Chu sat beside David Kumar. Both now held new positions. Lauren, Director of Global Air's Anti-Bias Program. David Huck, Customer Policy Advisor for the entire Airline Alliance. They were living proof of the message Ethan was about to deliver. He looked toward them, then addressed the hall. The question is not, does discrimination still exist? The question is, when it happens right in front of you, what will you do? Will you accept it, ignore it, or use whatever power you have, economic, political, or simply your own voice, to make change? The light from hundreds of phone screens glowed as they recorded every word. The official conference live stream had already surpassed 2.4 million viewers. Fittingly, the person running the stream today was Chloe, the teenage girl who had recorded the entire Flight 447 incident. Ethan clicked to the next slide. 3 large words filled the screen: consequences, opportunity, witnesses. To create change, you need 3 elements: real consequences for discriminatory behavior, an opportunity for those who were wrong to make it right, and witnesses, people who refuse to stay silent. He gestured toward Lauren and David. The flight attendant who once told me to leave my seat now trains thousands of others, so they don't repeat the same mistake. The supervisor who backed the wrong call now writes new policies to protect customers. That is opportunity. Applause broke out, not because of a fairy tale ending, but because the audience recognized the truth. Cultural change doesn't come from mass firings. It comes from turning the very links that once caused the problem into drivers of reform. Ethan lowered his voice, but it grew sharper. If that day I had chosen to call the CEO of Global Air in private and demand Lauren be reassigned, maybe I would have. But there would be no new policies, no training program, no #seat while black turning into a movement, and 23 states wouldn't have changed their laws. Another slide appeared, showing statistics. Bias-related complaints in the airline industry down 73%. 98% of frontline staff completed training. 47. Multi-industry corporations adopted similar policies. 23 states passed or strengthened anti-discrimination laws. This time, the applause lasted longer. Ethan concluded, real change doesn't happen in one explosive moment. It happens in a chain of moments where each person, from the CEO to the frontline employee, from the passenger to the citizen, decides to be better than they were yesterday. He stepped down from the podium, but before leaving the stage, turned back and looked straight into the live stream camera. Next time you witness discrimination, you have 2 choices: be a spectator or be a witness who sparks change. The decision is yours. The screen behind him shifted to a live counter. Over 500,000 comments in 40 minutes. Lines like, "I won't be silent anymore," and "starting today," scrolled non-stop. Backstage, Lauren approached Ethan. "Thank you, not just for giving me a chance, but for teaching me that real justice is when we all change together." Ethan smiled. "And now, you'll be the one teaching that to others." The speech was over, but its ripple spread far beyond the conference walls. On Twitter, #WitnessForChange began trending worldwide. Major outlets ran the headline, "From first class to the civil rights stage, Ethan Carter's story redefines service industry standards." Ethan stepped out of the convention center into the afternoon sun. He knew this wasn't the end. Change is a journey without a finish line. And tomorrow, there would be more moments that would force someone to choose, stay silent or take action. On that flight, a single challenged first-class seat set off a wave of change. 6 months later, from the cabin of an airplane to the floor of a conference hall, Ethan Carter had proven a simple truth. Power only has real meaning when it is used to lift others up. He didn't choose retaliation. He chose to set a precedent, not only forcing an airline to change, but compelling an entire service industry to examine itself. The results were not just in the numbers. Complaints down 73%, 23 states amending their laws, 47 corporations adopting new policies, but in the people. A flight attendant becoming a trainer, a supervisor becoming a reformer, a security officer becoming a voice on unconscious bias. His message was clear. Some stories need witnesses. Some moments need the whole world to see. And some changes only happen when someone is brave enough to demand them. If you believe that justice is not some distant concept, but the responsibility of every person who stands in the face of injustice, like this video, subscribe to follow the next stories, and comment below with the words, "Stand up." To tell the world you will not stay silent. Because silence feeds prejudice, and a voice, no matter how small, can change an entire system. And the final question for you, when that moment comes, will you be a spectator or the one who creates change?